Hello YouTube. So today I want to talk about why I think it's important to have some standards for how many total golds teams are calculated with. If you don't know what I mean by gold, this is a term used by the CN community to represent how many total 5 stars a team has. For example, a team with 4 C0 5 stars and 1 R1 5-star weapon would be a 5 gold team. Or a team with 1 C2 5-star and 1 R1 5-star weapon would be 4 gold. I believe it's called gold because when you pull a 5-star, the animation is gold instead of purple. Now, why is it important to have some standards on this? Well, when a team is calced, people will always naturally compare it to what other teams calculate at. This is inevitable, there's no way around it. However, with no standards on how many golds teams are calculated at, this can lead to some very unfair comparisons between different teams. This is because some characters' best teams require way more golds than others. For example, take a look at Ayaka. Her team is Ayaka, Shenhe, Kazuha, Kokomi. This team is already 4 gold. And on top of that, it is very significant to have Mist Splitter on Ayaka, as this weapon is more than a 20% DPS increase over her other options. And since Ayaka is more than 80% of this team's damage, this is extremely significant. So now you have a C0 R1 Ayaka with 3 other 5-star units on the team. This makes it a 5 gold team, which is rather expensive compared to what other units have when calculated at their own C0 R1 level. For comparison, let's take a look at Wanderer. Wanderer's best team is typically going to be Wanderer, Farwazan, Bennett, and then the 4th slot somebody like Genshin, Thoma, Layla, or Rosaria, depending on the specific content. Notice how Wanderer does not need any 5-star units on his team other than himself. This means that if we calculate him at C0 R1, his team is only 2 gold. So would it really be fair to compare this 2 gold team to the much more expensive 5 gold Ayaka team? Now you might say, okay sure, this Wanderer team has way less 5 stars needed compared to Ayaka, but it needs C6 Faruzan to be competent, which is rather expensive. And this is a fair point. C6 Faruzan can be more expensive than getting a 5-star unit depending on your luck. However, she is a dedicated support, so she will always be on Wanderer's banners. This means you can easily go for it while going for Wanderer constellations at the same time, which is an excellent investment since Wanderer constellations are so good. As a result, if you are looking to invest into, say, a 4 gold Wanderer team, the Faruzan constellations will come at no added cost, since you should get them along the way by the time you get to C2 Wanderer anyway. Now, if we were to compare both units at 5 gold, it would be C3 R1 Wanderer, Faruzan, Bennett, and the 4th unit. For this comparison, I am using Thoma instead of Yunjin. Wanderer would cheat considerably higher with Yunjin instead of Thoma, but I'm using Thoma instead to remove the argument of if Wanderer needs a shield or not from the equation, so let's remove any arguments about Yunjin being single target. Compared to C0 R1 Ayaka with Kazuha, Kokomi, Shenhe, both teams overall cost the exact same amount of golds, and since Wanderer's team with 2 golds was already very comparable DPS to Ayaka's 5 gold team, naturally, when both are put at 5 gold, as you can see, Wanderer's DPS completely eclipses way beyond Ayaka's. Yet, I consistently see people speak negatively about Wanderer for being expensive, but I seldom ever hear anyone say this about Ayaka, even though in reality, she is more expensive for much less DPS. This is a part of the reason why I said that Ayaka is extremely overrated. Don't get me wrong, she's good, but her team is comparatively very expensive compared to other units' teams, while other units, if given that same amount of 5-star pull investment, would shoot far past her own DPS. To show that this doesn't just apply to Wanderer, let's take out a few more examples. 2 of Raiden's best teams are Raiden, Zhongling, Xingqiu, Bennett, and Raiden, Sarah, Kazuha, Bennett. In the first team, she only has herself as the 5-star unit. In the second, it's just herself and Kazuha. Furthermore, you really do not need a 5-star weapon on her, because Engulfing Lightning is honestly not a significant increase over R5 catch. This frees up room for another gold from Constellation. Let's use the second team. In this Hyper Raiden team, if we were to get it to C3 Raiden with R5 catch, this is now a 5 gold team. I think it goes without saying that a C3 Raiden team is going to do significantly more DPS than Ayaka, as we can see here. Now of course, the Sheet DPS is not everything. Just because X does more DPS than Y on Sheet does not mean that they will actually perform better in practice. However, with the teams I used as example, Ayaka has way more off-sheet problems than Wanderer and Raiden. As I mentioned before, Ayaka deals more than 80% of her team's damage, and her boss does like 68% of her damage. While front-loading this much damage is absolutely incredible in the right scenarios for it, this also means that if you whiff or burst, you lose almost all of your team's damage and are basically fucked until the next rotation. And if enemies can't be frozen, it is very easy to whiff this burst. Plus in AoE, Ayaka's burst actually does not have that great of AoE, and Kazuha is not really enough grouping to fix this because he groups once on field, then once he's off field, the grouping is gone, and the enemies can just separate again. In addition to this, if enemies can't be frozen, Ayaka loses 20% crit rate, which is also a pretty significant drop in DPS. I know it feels like I'm really picking on Ayaka, so I'm going to get off of her ass and get on Hu Tao's ass instead now. As you might know, Hu Tao is another unit that, while very good, I believe is still extremely overrated. Let's take a look at one of our strongest teams, Hu Tao, Yelan, Xingqiu, Zhongli. If we give Hu Tao Staff of Homa, which is a very significant increase on her, then this is a 4 gold team. It's not as expensive as Ayaka's. However, if a team like this for Hu Tao is going to be calced, and used as a point of comparison, then the teams it's compared to should also be at 4 gold. So let's take a look at a team of C2 R1 Wanderer, Bennett, Farazan, Thoma. This is a 4 gold team, while being significantly stronger than the Hu Tao team at the same amount of 5-star investment. Now let's take a look at the team of C2 Raiden with R5 Ketch, Bennett, Sara, and Kazuha. This is a 4 gold team, and again, obviously stronger than the Hu Tao team, although the gap isn't as big as it is with Wanderer. As we mentioned with Ayaka, Sheet DPS isn't everything. However, in my opinion, Hu Tao has more off-sheet problems than these two units. For starts, her team is extremely single target. Secondly, if she isn't below 50% HP, she loses a very significant amount of damage. This is one of the biggest oversights I think people have with Hu Tao that causes her to be overrated. I intend to make a separate video fully explaining this. Now, I do want to make it clear that simply comparing units at the same amount of golds isn't perfect either. For example, someone who has been playing Genshin for a while and investing horizontally might have most if not all the 5-star units they need for said Ayaka team already. So all they have to do now is, if they want to play her, simply pull her and her weapon. For the current state of the account in this example, the Ayaka team would be cheaper than going for a C2 to 3 Wanderer if they don't have him already. However, let's say someone doesn't have any of those 4 units for the Ayaka team yet. Then they would have to wait for Ayaka to rerun, then they would have to wait for Shenhe to rerun, then they would have to wait for Kokomi to rerun, then they would have to wait for Kazuha to rerun. And there is no way to know when these units will all rerun, so they could be sitting with this team incomplete for a very, very long time, as sometimes characters take up to a year if not longer to rerun. Meanwhile, if they were to go for Wanderer, they know all they have to do is save up before he eventually reruns and go for that banner. No need to chase after a bunch of other banners. This is both more convenient and less expensive. But I do acknowledge that simply calcing for teams at the same amount of goals isn't a perfect solution either. So what is? Well, as far as other people's calcs go, I don't intend to try and change the way other people do anything. However, as far as my own theory crafting goes, here's what I will be doing with my own calcs from now on. When I calc a character, I will be doing 2 separate calcs for them. One calc will have them at C0 R1, and all 5-star units on the team at C0, no regards for the total amount of golds. The second calc will have them at 4 golds. The first calc will allow me to calc them in their best team without any forced restrictions, while the second team will allow them to be fairly compared to other units at the same amount of 5-star investment. In addition to this, there are some other changes I intend to make with how I calculate things from now on, which I will quickly go over. Previously, I would calculate characters' talents at level 999 per the rules of Qingming standards. This doesn't really make sense because this is extremely suboptimal talent distribution for a lot of characters. Instead, I will now just be calculating teams with all characters triple crowned. We have access to a lot of crowns now and get more every patch, so there's no reason to not be using them really. These suboptimal talent distributions is part of the reason why so many people overrate pure Hyperbloom teams. Now don't get me wrong, Hyperbloom is a very overpowered reaction and I firmly believe it's the best reaction in the entire game. However, these suboptimal talent distributions kind of cause people to compare suboptimally built teams to Hyperbloom teams which are much less affected by this suboptimal talent distribution since Hyperbloom doesn't care about talents. Also for reference, all the calcs that I have shown today in this video have been using these updated standards. But yeah, that's about all I wanted to talk about in this video. I know I may have sounded negative regarding Hu Tao and Ayaka, but I feel like it was necessary to make this example to show my point here. Despite the things I pointed out about both of them, I did want to make it clear that I still think they are both very good characters, and you shouldn't let anything I said today sway you away from investing into them if you are planning to. But if you enjoyed this video, please ensure to drop a like and subscribe, maybe leave a comment. Thanks, bye.